Hello and welcome to this lesson on audiences in our podcast course. So as we go into this, it is assumed that you already have an idea for a podcast that you might want to make. We haven't really gone through that in this course because I suppose it's going to be unique to everyone. And I don't want to be generic in terms of ideas by saying you should do this or you should do that. But let's say you have an idea for a podcast that you want to make. Who is the audience? So you've got to think about the listener. Who's the listener? Who are people who are going to listen to this? Is it children? Is it students? Is it doctors? Is it farmers? Is it the general listener? Although I would say that the general listener doesn't even exist. You need to visualize the target audience and prepare accordingly. So what is the context in which you think somebody might be listening? A lot of people listen to podcasts when they're commuting from A to B. They could be walking, they could be getting on a bike, they could be on a bus, they could be driving, or they're engaged in other eyes busy, hands busy activities, like maybe they're at the gym, or they're, again, cleaning up the kitchen. That's when I listen to a lot of podcasts. Now, why should you consider this? Well, it's so that you recognize that there's a whole variety of different people who might be listening and are probably all listening in different contexts. You cannot be all things to all people. That's why I think the general audience doesn't necessarily work. But if you think about who your target audience is, that will kind of make you pitch the tone and the language accordingly. So, let's say, for example, that you were thinking, I'm going to do a biology or a physiology podcast. Now, if your target audience is medical or healthcare professionals, you'll probably be free to use whatever technical terms that you wanted. But if your audience was students, maybe you might need to break down those technical terms so that they're understood. There's no point in kind of just throwing together a word salad into the conversation if the intended audience can't understand it. Now, let me give you an example of this. So we've mentioned the machine before, and as I said, we're going to be referring to this all the way throughout this course. So the machine, it's a computer science education podcast, and it has me and a whole bunch of my colleagues from SETU on it. Initially, we were kind of looking at this with respect to our own students, but very, very quickly we changed it to kind of thinking this could be a nice way to maybe recruit some students into the course or kind of get the message out there about this, computer science is a good discipline to go into. So it's been running since 2018. It's kind of a bit sporadic at the moment, purely because I don't have the time to produce it at the rate at which I would like to. But hey, there you go. Once we decided, no, the intended audience for this is going to be potential students, that made us think, okay, these are people who are probably interested in tech, but maybe haven't received any formal training. That meant that we had to think about what we were discussing and the level to which we would discuss it. Now, by definition, or by extension, that kind of goes along to our own students as well, particularly students, say, in first year, second year, who maybe don't have deep technical knowledge. So if we're getting into a topic like, say, AI, for example, our artificial intelligence, not to be confused with AI as understood by our agriculture and science colleagues, AI for a novice, it doesn't matter whether somebody's a sixth year student or a first year student, they probably don't know an awful lot about it. So we would have to kind of pitch the language and pitch the tone and the depth of the discussion accordingly. That's not about dumbing anything down. It's just about being inclusive. So initially we talked, our audience is potential students, by extension, our own students, and then it's the wider community. Now, this podcast, as I said, can be found pretty much everywhere. And what's kind of interesting is that it has more of an audience now outside of our own catchment area. Actually, there's more people listening abroad than there is in Ireland. which I think is quite kind of interesting. But we still have stayed true to our mission of this is a podcast it's a serious tech podcast, but for people who maybe aren't necessarily tech professionals. Now, one of the things that we did is an old trick from radio, is that we thought about, you invent a fake listener. And so try to think of somebody specific, or maybe a few specific people, and you give them a backstory. And the idea behind this is that this is somebody who you can bear in mind when you're preparing episodes, when you're kind of getting episodes together. You're thinking about, would this person get it? Am I going at the right level for this person? So this is Emma. Emma does not exist, by the way, just to be 100% clear. Emma does not exist. She's a person that I made up. She is, so as I said there, Emma's 22. She lives in Wexford and she works in Dunn's stores. She did reasonably well in her Leaving Cert a number of years ago, and she started a course in business and marketing in Cork, but she didn't really like it, and she dropped out. She kind of did it because she didn't really know what else to do. Her guidance counsellor in her secondary school hadn't really that's just what she went with. She's thought about going back to college, but she doesn't really know what she wants to do. She does enjoy computing. She plays video games, and she's also done some web development for her a team that she's involved in. She never really considered computing as an option because it wasn't in her school, and it wasn't really presented as a career option for girls. Now, that's a whole other issue that we won't get into, but I mean, it's not true, but it's unfortunately a perception. So Emma now wonders if perhaps she's wrong. Maybe she could get into computing. So Emma is our target listener. So even today, anytime I'm preparing an episode, I think of Emma. And also when I'm bringing guests onto the show, as we're going back and forth, usually over email, I will share Emma's biography so that they think of her too, and we pitch the conversation accordingly. It still means we can have a technical, but we can have an accessible conversation. So, for example, what does that mean in practice? It means that, say, for example, a guest uses a technical term, or because it's computing, they use an acronym, because there's acronyms all over the place. I'll often stop them and get them to explain what that term is and what it means. It's not for me. I know what the term means, but it's for Emma. It's for the potential listener. So, know your audience. I want you to identify who you're trying to reach and try and be specific if you can. It's not a bad idea to make up a fake listener and make up a fake biography for who they are. Then that will kind of dictate how you pitch the tone of your conversation. And remember, you cannot be all things to all people. So don't try. But if you try to be a specific thing to a specific set of people, that might actually bring in more people than you originally intended. There's just a few references. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.